They were self-harming. They wanted to kill themselves rather than live. That's what we drove them to. The other thing was this. Now, as you know, figures keep on changing. Since 2001 or 2000, we had 1,417 arrests of suspected terrorists on the basis of suspicions. Let me tell you this. If you were one of them, one out of the 85% of these people, were innocent. They were released. But look at the consequences. If you're arrested, what's your employer going to think of you? If you're arrested, if you apply for a job, and if you don't declare that, what are the implications of that? What happens when you're arrested if you're locked in for 28 days? And negative damage done, and well, there's no research, there are no pangs of conscience, there's no constitution, there's no recompense for these people. Honestly, there's no recompense for these people of any kind, and we should be ashamed of themselves. I'm ashamed of the country I live in. I'm a UK citizen, I'm ashamed of the way we're treating our community. Last thing I'm going to end with this, First of all, this is only possible when you create a politics of culture. It's a political fear and a culture of fear. The culture of fear is clear in every newspaper story about bombs here, Islamic bomb there, terrorism there. It's a culture of fear of Islamization across Europe. Honestly, that has been created, a consensus has been created. And I think the only change will come when we change the politics of this country. When we move away from the politics of fear. When we're more democratic about it, when we hold ourselves accountable. And about Aaron's report, I think all of you here, all of you, if you think about it, it's such an important report that we should take it in our communities. If you belong to an organisation, put an agenda. Read the report, at least read the recommendations. Discuss it in the commission. Send it to MP, by the way. Send it to MP and say, hey, I want to have a discussion with you. What's going on here? This is unacceptable. This is violation of human rights. This is totally unacceptable. Link with other organizations who are solidarity. That's a tough challenge to engage people. It's a very, very tough challenge, but we should do it. And I want to say to people that if surveillance were part of community engagement, we should not participate in it. We should say, no, thank you very much, we don't need your money. That's how it is. We should resist. We should not collaborate with policies like that. Resistance is the way forward. I don't think there's any compromise on this personal decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Also, our thanks to Phyllis Stark, who has to go. But thank you very much for making the time. Now, last but not least, I'm particularly pleased that Bob is speaking at this particular juncture, because I think what Bob brings in is that kind of reality we're all looking at. Bob Lambert, most of you will know him, but just to jog your memories, and for those who don't know Bob Lambert, he currently is the co-founder and co-director of the European Muslim Research Centre at the University of Exeter, but more famously and more relevantly for people like myself, he was for many years part of the London Metropolitan Police and headed the Muslim Contact Unit, which did wonders, in my opinion, in working with the community in order to bring about a collective sense of safety, harmony, peace and such. I'm pretty sure that Bob can tell you more. Hopefully next time I'll introduce him to you as Dr. Bob Lambert, because I know that he has submitted his PhD thesis and awaiting his viva in the next couple of months. So Bob Lambert, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anas, and thank you, Lord Ahmed. I should also commend Aaron for a very detailed, I think a very important report. But I do want to strike perhaps the first note of optimism this evening. I think in my long experience, always working on the topic of violent threats to Londoners. I think whatever the current policy, and I can recall in the 1980s we had some pretty draconian legislation, but even then both police officers and people in the community were able to work quite constructively, often against the grain, and certainly my time on the Muslim Contact Unit, did often feel as if we were not only working against the grain, sometimes swimming against the tide being the war on terror, and any notion of working constructively with Muslim groups then, I think in some ways was even harder than it is now. And I don't want to be complacent, but I do want to keep to that note of individual ability to do the right thing in this area of work. Myself and police colleagues were invited to discuss Prevent when it was first being discussed, when it was in an embryonic form. And so myself, members of the Muslim Contact Unit, were asked to contribute our views on what we think would be the right way for the policy. In a sense, I mean, at the time I remember we thought that this was perhaps a way of extending our work on the Muslim Contact Unit. We knew that we'd built trust in communities. Often we'd built trust where previously there was suspicion and alienation. So we were keen on a project in principle that sought to expand that approach. I was asked, I remember, what examples did I have then of good, effective work against violent extremism? And it's important that we keep that focus as well. At that time, there was a very clear focus on what the problem was, violent extremism. I remember a colleague of mine giving the example of Abu Hamza. We've heard Lord Ahmed refer to that case, and I make no apologies for it. Here is a case where an individual is convicted in court of essentially a hate crime. And his conviction, when I look at it, it reminds me of hate crimes by violent extremists on the other side of the agenda. And I'm proud to say that myself, colleagues in the Special Branch, as was, can be very proud of work that has seen violent extremists of all kind sent to prison where they belong. Now, the relevant point here, I think the key part of Muslim Contact Unit experience that we passed over to ministers, civil servants concerned with the creation of Prevent was this. Two examples, and there's only time, but one example very close to home, the Finsbury Park Mosque, where Abu Hamza and many of his hardcore supporters worked. Only one Muslim community group in the neighbourhood had the commitment, the bravery and the skill to tackle Abu Hamza and his supporters. Without wishing to embarrass him, clearly Anas al-Kriti is part of that group that showed that bravery, no little skill and no little courage. Indeed, the police commander for Islington Borough is on record as saying that it was one of the best pieces of work that he's ever seen in his long experience in this field. And in saying that, we immediately acknowledge the problem, because as I gave that example at the time, it was already apparent to me that the influential lobbyists who believe that Anas and his friends are unfit to do this kind of work, it was already clear that that opinion was in the ascendant. So the police borough commander at the time was immediately challenged about the wisdom of his work. Sadly, the trustees at the Finsbury Park Mosque, 5 years on, they've succeeded on every level that Prevent cares about, and yet they've succeeded without any Prevent funding. I should also now turn to some other projects that predate Prevent, but have received Prevent funding. And there's a number of projects that I am aware of, and I think it's only fair to say that the Muslim groups running those projects have stayed true to exactly the same ideals that were discussed at the outset. That means to say notwithstanding the fact that they receive Prevent funding, the only basis on which those groups would ever give any information to the police or anyone else is if they